Hey, welcome back. On this episode we're gonna see the shutter speed dial right here and the aperture ring. So let's start with the shutter speed dial. This was where you select your speed, your camera, how fast you want to shoot, how fast the exposure is gonna be done, and it also has a couple of other settings. It's definitely not compared with those like modern cameras and whatever, but it's actually something really nice and it has a nice feel to it. And let's check it out a little closer. So this will have a stop, and you have to spin it and stop, and it will have like a click kind of sound on every time that it will be able to stop. So you cannot set it in between. So you set up your speed like that. Now the speeds actually range from 400 of a second to 8 seconds, and it has different colors. So the fractions of a second are in white. The complete full seconds or the second increments are in actually orange. I would say like orange, maybe yellowish color, orange yellowish color. It's not white. And then we have some special functions in red. So alright, let's see those numbers. It will be hard to display them over here in the wheel, so actually I just took the liberty of writing them down. And here you go. So these are the speeds that this thing has. And what's all these numbers? It says definitely more numbers than there. From 400 and 250, those two speeds, it goes up to one step increment. So if you know about your increments and your steps, it's one full step that it changes. So there is not something in between over here, 250 and 400. There's not 333 or whatever. It's just one full step that jumps in. And the same thing happens around the seconds. It jumps from 4 seconds to 8 seconds. So there's no setups for like 5 seconds or 6 seconds or this just on the bottom and the top of the list. They do jump one full step. But the RZ67 Pro II has the ability to do half increments, and this is the main reason why I pick up this camera, because it has those half increment steps, and other cameras would pretty much just jump from 4 to 8 to a full steps, and that's the only thing you can do with the as an example the RB, like the old systems. And I don't want to talk much about it because I don't own one and I don't know much about it, but I know that this was one of the features that was new on this camera, those half increment steps, and so I'm supposing that the other cameras did not have it. The only sad thing of this is that, like, okay, I have my light meter because this thing doesn't come with a light meter, and the thing is telling me like, hey, put it around 90 or 1/90 of a second or whatever. Light meters have the ability to put it on full steps, on 1/10 of a step, or half step increments, or 1/3 of steps increments. If you guys are using a Nikon camera or a Canon camera or any those Olympus or normal DSLRs, they usually come with 1/3 of increments of steps. So if you're changing your speed, you're changing your speed in thirds of increments. So when you do that, you're not gonna find the numbers that are actually in here on those, because this is just a half a step increment. So those cameras and some of the light meters would have an option to set up the measuring limits on half increments, and that's where you can know which of these numbers would be here. Anyway, if by any reason you're like, I like this speed and I don't know what aperture to do, but I know how to put it on the dial, whatever. So what is between 250 and 125, for example? Because those are the full steps. So I write it down a little bit, and so you have this. The ones with the mark on the side are the ones that are written on the camera, and the ones that don't have the mark are the ones that are not written on the camera. So you have 1/80th of a second, then you have the 90, between the 125 and 60 you have the 90, 60 and 30, well, that you can probably figure it out. 30, 60, right in the middle, that's 45. 30 and 15, well, that's 45 divided by 2 kind of thing. That will give you 22.5. So forget about the 0.5, just leave it at 22. There you go. So there you go, that's a 22, and then half of that is 11. Half of that would be like 5.5, so they kind of rounded it to 6. So between 8 and 4, obviously there's a 6 in there. And then these two are actually, I think, the easiest to remember, you know, the 1.4 aperture lens that you always wanted. That's actually, this is speed, right? But so that's, and the 2.8, the super expensive portrait lens that has a zoom and whatever. These two numbers are very common to see on lenses. So 1.4, 2.8, and then between 4 and 8 you got the 6. Between 8 and 15 you got 11, and then 11, 22, 45. Then you got the 90, and then 180. So it's kind of obvious once you see it, like written at least one time. And then on the second part of it, you have the 1 second, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, and 8 seconds. And just between 1 and 2 you have again the 1.4, and between 2 and 4 you have the 2.8 seconds. So it's once you see it one time there, you can read it, you can write it down maybe, and you can always, I mean, for me it's already I got this on my mind. It's you know, you start with 180 and you can see the increments, just dividing by half, just doing it like half, one step but between the half. So it's not a complicated thing, you can definitely remember it. And that's for the numbers that it has. Now beyond 8 there is a B option, and we used this B option in previous episodes, which is like a bulb mode, and the shutter would remain open as long as the pressure is applied on the shutter release button. So, and it will close as soon as the shutter release button is gone. So I'm gonna put it on multiple exposure mode. I'm gonna take out the dark screen, so I'll be able to shoot. Make sure that this is cranked, and as in a B mode right now. So I'm gonna press this. You can see the exposure has been done. If I release the finger, or if I release the button, it closes the cover right here, and I finish my exposure. So you can do your own timing up to 1 minute. As we saw on the warnings, the sound warning video, the maximum that you can do that is for 1 minute on the B mode. So if you actually do need to do like a 15-minute exposure or something like that, you can actually wind the camera right just one more time and do another exposure for 1 minute, finish that and do another exposure for 1 minute. And if you're doing it multiple exposures, you're actually exposing on the same frame, so you may be okay with film. Because, you know, if you're shooting some moving stars or something that's really slow and you just want to have like old lines or whatever, the amount of time that it takes you just to crank and press the button again, it's not much. So you can probably continue doing the longer exposures, just tricking the camera like that, doing multiple exposures on the same the same negative, on the same film, on the same exposure. That's one way to do it. Alright, next thing is RBL. That setting right there, RBL. Can you see it? Can you see it? Maybe a little bit hard to see. Not sure if you can see it. It's an RBL, which means RB lenses. So revolving back lenses. This RZ Pro II has the ability to use not the lenses from the RC systems only, but the lenses from the RB system, which is an older camera that doesn't have any of the contacts to communicate with the camera. Now I tried to take out the lens and it didn't let me. There we go. So it doesn't have any of these contacts, those old RB lenses. So you can still put it in here, you can still work with it if you found one cheap one, or if you really like the glass. These glasses has no problems at all. But if you actually had ones and you just upgraded the body only and you're thinking to upgrade the lens later or whatever, you can still shoot with all those RB lenses. Otherwise, you're never gonna be using this. AEF mode. Now, here's a funny thing. When you jump into AEF mode, which is automatic exposure finders, I'm not sure if you can see it right there. I'm gonna jump in there and pay attention to this middle part right here. as I move it down, it popped out, and now I'm locked in there and I cannot move away from there. It's actually not letting you move out there. This is a security mechanism when you go to AEF, which is automatic exposure finders, which it means there's a viewfinder up here that would be able to set the exposure either automatically or manually up here. But there's a couple of viewfinders from Mamiya that fit on this camera that communicate through these contacts right here with the camera to set up the speed and to do the triggering and all this stuff. When you have it here, obviously the camera settings will be set up here, the speed. So this should not move at all. And you know, if you're moving your camera or holding this thing up here, it may have a problem where you're moving it. So that's why they made this locking system, and it will not allow you to do that. I do not use one of those automatic exposure finders, so I never use this AEF, but it helps me when I'm in a dark spot. I just move it down like that, and I find myself locked. So I'm like, okay, if I unlock it by pressing this button that came in here, you push that, and then you spin it. So after I'm in AEF, if I cannot see anything, if I'm in a dark studio and only the model has light and I'm pretty dark over here, I don't need the light. So I know that I spin this wheel. Alright, I locked myself in there. So I know I can press it, and the next one will be 400, the next one will be 250, 180, 125, 90, 60, 45, 30. I mean, and this is just coming naturally. Like you go there, okay, and then you already know that if I'm locked in there, I press it and I go like this. I know that I'm around 60. Alright, press it. There you go. Now I'm on 30. I lock it. And yeah, I never really gone all the way down to non-seconds or whatever. But I usually go 125 or 60, sometimes 30 if I need some extra light or whatever. If I'm shooting some nature stuff. So it just helps you out if you don't see now. If you don't have time to, or you cannot see this thing, it helps you to realize where you are. Otherwise it will just like keep spinning around like that, and you don't know where you are, and you have to actually look at it. That would be it for this, the shutter speed dial, of course. Now one thing to notice, just a little caution thing. The lenses from the RB67, here's the deal, you may be thinking like, oh cool, maybe I can get a cheaper lens or whatever. The lenses on the RB67, compared to the lenses from the from these ones, they have a different focusing. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is to put the dial on the RBL setting to be able to use it, right? And the shutter speed of the RB lenses is actually set up on the lens. So this is RBL. So what if I want to shoot slow and it just says RBL? What was going on? Well, the shutter speed is decided on the lens. So on the lens you decide the aperture, and in the lens you decide the speed as well, and then you shoot. But so you pick it up from here, right? Also, the RB lens's focal distance is well, it's 111 millimeters, and on the RC lenses it's actually 104 millimeters, which means it's like 11 centimeters and 10 centimeters, and this is the focal distance, not from here beyond, but from here to the actual image that you're trying to set up. So if you actually have an RZ lens, you're never gonna be able to focus it to infinite. If you're like right here, you have to go 7 millimeters out. You see, it moves out, right? Remember this guy? So you have to move 7 millimeters out for it to have a perfect exposure on this, and then from there you can start focusing at least to infinite. So you have to do that little thing. If you know, you just got to be 7 millimeters out, and that is something that it will not be, you know, reading here like, oh, you got the 7 millimeters. It does have some marks up here, but and they do look like millimeters. Yeah, there we are. There we go. So you see up here it says millimeters. There's little markings up there. So you go, there's a mark for 5 and 10. So you go 7 millimeters out, and that's where you helps you out to focus on the infinite with the RB lenses. So that's a little, you know, funny thing to take notice. Then we're gonna go to the aperture ring, which is on all lenses. The aperture ring, it will set the diaphragm to a desired aperture. You know, the middle hole there, allowing obviously to hold light back or to pass the extra light, and obviously it would increase or decrease your depth of field that you have depending on the aperture of the lens, of course. These lenses, obviously with the medium format, they're very different from the 35 millimeters, because 35 millimeters, if you shoot a 2.8 or a 1.8, you can still see a very good amount of the image in focus. But if you go on these lenses at 2.8 and you see a person's face and you focus maybe on one eye, maybe the other eye is going to be out of focus. Like, you shoot it straight, right? So you shoot on one eye, but maybe you're getting the lashes on focus and the actually pupil of the eye is out of focus. Definitely the ears, when you go all the way back to from the person's face all the way to the ears are just a mess blurry, and that's a 2.8. And we're not doing macro photography. I mean, you're shooting a whole face portrait, but it's just how shallow this depth of field is. A 2.8 is just extremely shallow. You get this thing, you put a 2.8, you focus in here, and by this part over here, it's already blurred out really bad that you don't see any details. But while on here you see extreme detail, but it's just this little part over here. So if you're doing those big apertures, I mean, you need a lot of light, yes, but if you're gonna be doing those big apertures, be aware that you're gonna may lose a lot of detail of the subjects that you're shooting. Unless you're shooting this from very far, then it would not matter, because the distance of the relative distance of the focal depth of field that you're using over here. So to shoot a person, normally I would have to go to f11 or f16. You know, the least I can do is f8, maybe f5.6 if I'm shooting someone from far. F2.8, really, if I don't have any other option, I would have to shoot that. But normally I would try to go f11, f8, and that's actually the sweet spot of the lens, what they call it. Each lens has a like a sweet spot, like the perfect amount of light that falls in, that doesn't bounce anywhere or whatever. And the sweet spots are usually in the middle of the lenses. If you go all the way closed or all the way open, it usually gives you a little bit of some aberrations. So the sweet spots usually are in the middle of the lenses, and it's not much thing to do. I mean, you just spin it and select the aperture number that you want to have in your lens. Obviously, all this works, and you see that the mark in there. So you just align it to that mark. Now, a funny thing is that this lens will click, right? It clicks on the full stops, right? You can hear that. But it has a marking for the middle one. So this lens, you can actually stop right in the middle of this and just decide, okay, you know what, from here to here is one stop, here is half a stop, so maybe I want less than half a stop. There you go, 1/4 of a stop past 11. So you can actually kind of figure it out a little bit of what kind of aperture stop do you want. Obviously, considering that if you are focusing the bellows over here and you're doing something really close which demands you to put the bellows out too much, you may be losing, you know, half stop or one stop of light according to the lens that you will be shooting with. And yeah, this will be another video. We actually saw that already. So that's also something to be considered with when you're measuring your exposure, which I know it's a lot of numbers and dials and stuff, but it's not complicated. It really comes like a second nature. It's just like driving a car. I mean, there's so many steps you need to do to drive a car to make sure that it's movable. And if you consider writing everything, it's just a complete mess. It's a whole theory. But you know, once you get used to it, you can drive a car without even thinking sometimes, which is bad. Alright, so this will be for this video, and next video we'll see something different. Excited to keep going on, so I'll see you guys next video. Bye bye.